Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The heavy mahogany doors of the master suite splintered inward, the lock shattering under a force that was less human and more akin to a natural disaster. Julian didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He simply continued to fold a small, knitted white sweater, placing it gently into the open suitcase on the bed, his back turned to the intruder. The air in the room, previously scented with the soft, melancholic fragrance of lavender and Julian's own distress, was instantly annihilated by the scent of ozone, burnt cedar, and raw, suffocating rage. It was the pheromones of a prime alpha who had finally, after 1,000 days of silence, lost control. Turn around. The voice growled, low and vibrating through the floorboards. Julian smoothed a wrinkle on the tiny garment. You are not supposed to be in this wing, Lord Valerian. The contract states, burn the contract, Valerian snarled, stepping into the room. The sound of his boots on the hardwood was heavy, predatory. The physician sent the report to the main estate by mistake. He congratulated me. Julian finally froze. His hand hovered over the suitcase. He congratulated me, Valerian repeated, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper as he closed the distance between them. On the air, I am expecting. Except, I haven't touched you in 3 years, Julian. I haven't stepped foot in this room since our wedding night. So, tell me, before I tear this city apart stone by stone, whose scent is that clinging to your soul? Julian turned slowly. He was pale, thinner than he had been 3 years ago, his champagne-colored hair grown long and untamed. But his eyes, usually cast down in submission, were dry and hard as diamonds. He looked at the man who was legally his husband, the darkly handsome, terrifyingly powerful Duke of the Northern Reach, and delivered the blow that would shatter their Cold War. It is none of your concern, Valerian, Julian said, his voice steady. You made it clear I was nothing but a political hostage to you. Furniture to be ignored. I needed a child to secure my freedom under imperial law. Since you refused to give me one, I went to a clinic. I am carrying a stranger's child. And tomorrow, I am leaving. The silence that followed was louder than the storm raging outside the manor. For 3 years, the Varick estate had been a tomb for Julian. He had been sold into this marriage to pay off his father's gambling debts, a sacrificial lamb given to the empire's most feared general. Valerian Varick was a man whispered about in fear, a prime alpha with power so volatile it was rumored he could crush a man's skull with a thought. When Julian had arrived, terrified and barely 20, he had expected cruelty. He had expected pain. What he received was far worse, absolute erasure. On their wedding night, Valerian had looked at him with an expression of tortured restraint, then walked out. He moved to the east wing. He took his meals alone. If they passed in the hallway, Valerian would look through him, his jaw clenched, his body rigid, as if Julian were a ghost haunting his halls. Julian had tried. For the first year, he had baked sweets, left notes, and tried to engage the staff. But the staff was loyal to the Duke and mirrored his coldness. By the second year, the loneliness had begun to rot Julian from the inside out. An omega without a mate, without touch, without a pack, begins to fade. The touch starvation was a slow, agonizing death of the spirit. By the third year, Julian realized he was dying. Not physically, but existentially. He needed an anchor. If he couldn't have a husband, he would have a child. The imperial law of succession had a loophole. If a bonded omega is neglected for 3 years, producing an heir of any bloodline grants them the status of independent regent. It was a desperate, scandalous gamble. But Julian had nothing left to lose. A clinic, Valerian repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. He stood at the foot of the bed, his dark eyes scanning Julian's flat stomach. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You let a stranger. You let doctors. I let them give me a future, Julian cut in, his chin lifting defiantly. Something you denied me. You ignored me, Valerian. You looked at me with disgust for 1,000 days. Did you think I would simply wither away and die quietly in the West Wing? I am an omega, yes, but I am still a man. Valerian gripped the bedpost, the wood groaning under his hand. His knuckles were white. Disgust, he choked out. You think I stayed away because of disgust? What else? Julian laughed bitterly, a broken sound. You never spoke to me. You never touched me. You treated me like I was radioactive. Because you were. Valerian roared, the restraint snapping. The shout was so loud it rattled the crystal chandelier. Julian flinched, stepping back against the wardrobe. Valerian paced the room, running a hand through his jet-black hair, his chest heaving. The pheromones pouring off him were confusing. Usually, an angry alpha smelled like sulfur and burning wood. But beneath the rage, Julian smelled something else. Salt. Rain. Deep, agonizing grief. Do you know why they call me the Butcher of the North, Julian? Valerian asked, his voice shaking. He didn't wait for an answer. It isn't just because of the war. It's my blood. My lineage is cursed with hyperaggression. My pheromones. They don't just dominate. They crush. They induce fear, panic, and pain in omegas who aren't perfectly compatible. Valerian stopped pacing and looked at Julian with eyes that were suddenly raw and vulnerable. On our wedding night, I smelled you. Freesia and vanilla. It was the most intoxicating thing I had ever encountered. And I felt the beast wake up. I knew if I touched you, if I claimed you, I wouldn't be able to stop. I would hurt you. I would break you. Julian stared at him, his breath caught in his throat. So, you left. I left to protect you. Valerian slammed his hand against his own chest. I spent 3 years taking suppressants strong enough to kill a horse just to exist in the same house as you without ravishing you. I stayed away because I was terrified that one slip of control would shatter you. I thought if I gave you time, if I kept my distance, you would be safe. You thought ignoring me was kindness? Julian whispered, tears finally pricking his eyes. Valerian, I was lonely. I was dying of loneliness. I didn't need safety. I needed you. I know. Valerian rasped, stepping closer. He looked defeated. I see that now. I see the suitcases. I see the sweater. I see that my cowardice pushed you into the arms of a medical vial. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from Julian's face, trembling. He didn't dare make contact. You are carrying another man's child, Valerian said, the words heavy with pain. By law, you are free. You can leave. I have no claim on you anymore. Julian watched the powerful man crumble. For 3 years, he had built a narrative of a cruel, heartless husband. Now, he saw a man who had tortured himself to keep a promise of safety that no one had asked him to make. It was tragic. It was stupid. But it was not hate. It's a donor, Julian said softly. Anonymous. There is no other man, Valerian. Just biology. It doesn't matter. Valerian turned away, his shoulders slumped. It is not my blood. The council will never accept it. You have your freedom, Julian. Go. Before I change my mind and lock you in this tower forever. Julian looked at the suitcase. Then he looked at Valerian's back. He thought of the cold nights. But he also thought of the way the library was always stocked with his favorite books, something he assumed the steward did. He thought of the rare, imported fruits that appeared at breakfast, something he assumed was standard protocol. Did you order the moonflowers for the garden? Julian asked suddenly. Valerian stiffened. They are rare. I heard you like them. And the silk blankets? The ones from the Southern Isles. The winters here are cold. You are delicate. Julian let out a long, shaky breath. It hadn't been indifference. It had been a distorted, suffocating form of care. A love language spoken in silence and distance. Julian walked forward. He didn't reach for the suitcase. He reached for Valerian. When his hand touched the alpha's shoulder, Valerian flinched as if burned. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Instinctive, dangerous. Don't, Valerian warned, his eyes flashing red. My suppressants wore off hours ago. The scent of your pregnancy. It's confusing the beast. It smells like you, but also like a stranger. It makes me want to kill something. Then look at me, Julian commanded, stepping around to face him. He took Valerian's rough, scarred hand and placed it on his own flat stomach. Valerian tried to pull away, but Julian held him fast. There is no heartbeat yet, Julian said. It is early. Very early. It is another alpha's seed. Valerian snarled, though his thumb brushed the fabric of Julian's shirt with agonizing tenderness. It is a clump of cells from a tube, Julian corrected. But the body carrying it is mine. And I am still your husband. Julian looked deep into the red-rimmed eyes of the Duke. You were a fool, Valerian. You made decisions for me without asking. You hurt me to save me. But I am not leaving because I stopped loving you. I was leaving because I thought you never loved me. I have loved you since the moment you walked down the aisle, Valerian confessed, his voice breaking. I have loved you every second of every miserable day. Then claim it, Julian whispered. Valerian froze. What? The child. Claim it. Blood adoption, Julian said, invoking an ancient, nearly forgotten rite of the Omegaverse. If a prime alpha pours his energy, his pheromones, and his blood oath into the bonding bite while the child is still forming, the magic of the bond can overwrite the lineage. The child becomes yours. Spiritually. Legally. Valerian looked at him with shock. You would let me mark you? After everything? After the neglect? You would let me bind you to me and erase the freedom you just fought for. I don't want freedom, Julian said, stepping into Valerian's space, pressing his chest against the alpha's rigid torso. I want a family. I want a home. And despite everything, my wolf still calls for you. The air in the room shifted. The scent of ozone flared, hot and electric. Valerian's restraint shattered. He didn't be gentle. He couldn't be. He grabbed Julian by the waist and hoisted him up, pinning him against the wall. Julian gasped, wrapping his legs around Valerian's waist as the alpha buried his face in the crook of Julian's neck. Mine, Valerian growled, his teeth grazing the sensitive scent gland. You are mine. The child is mine. I will burn the world before I let you leave now. Show me, Julian challenged, tilting his head back, baring his throat. Stop ignoring me, Valerian. See me. Valerian bit down. It wasn't a gentle nip. It was a claiming. A piercing of the skin that injected the mating venom directly into Julian's bloodstream. Julian cried out, a mix of pain and euphoria, as the bond that had been dormant for 3 years slammed into place like a sledgehammer. He felt Valerian's emotions flood his mind, the overwhelming possessiveness, the crippling fear of losing him, the vast, ocean-deep love that had been dammed up behind a wall of silence. And Valerian felt Julian. He felt the loneliness, the sorrow, but also the hope. And he felt the tiny spark of life within him. Valerian pulled back, his mouth stained with a drop of blood, his eyes glowing vibrant crimson. He pressed his forehead against Julian's. I will never leave this room again, Valerian swore, his voice rough. I will sleep by your feet if I have to. I will learn to control the urge to crush you. But I will never, ever ignore you again. Julian ran his fingers through Valerian's sweat-dampened hair. You better not. Because now you have 2 of us to take care of. Valerian lowered Julian onto the bed, kicking the open suitcase onto the floor. The little white sweater tumbled out, landing on the rug. Valerian didn't look at it. He only looked at his wife, his mate, his world. Let the Empire object, Valerian murmured, hovering over Julian, his hand protective and heavy over Julian's stomach. Let them try to say this air is not mine. I dare them. Julian smiled, pulling the alpha down for a kiss that tasted of blood, tears, and a new beginning. The silence was over. The storm had finally broken. And that is how the Butcher of the North was brought to his knees, not by a sword, but by the mercy of the one he tried to push away. If you enjoyed seeing the arrogant Duke finally lose control and claim what was his, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who neglected you for 3 years, even if he did it to protect you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.